PM, and I'll call to order our regularly scheduled commission meeting on April 16th, 2024. And first up is our consent agenda. I'd ask if any commissioners would like anything removed from the consent agenda this evening.
No,
And if not, would entertain a motion.
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion by Commissioner Christensen and second by Chair Tate. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes 4-0. That takes us to our accounts payable and purchasing report. And this is just review, right?
Yeah.
Nothing much on them.
Yeah, I don't have any comments.
No comments.
Commissioner Tankersley, any
No.
comments on
No.
investment report?
No, thank you.
Purchasing report, my apologies. Takes us to new employee introductions. Anybody new in the crowd? No. Consultant and partner reports. Up first, we have Mason, Bruce, and Gerard, and I think we have Brent Keller online.
Yep, there it is.
Welcome, Brent.
Thank you. Good evening. Well, the reforestation is complete for the 2023 stumpage sales. We're about a month ahead of last year. This time last year we were buried in snow, and so it's good to get that done. Because last year we went from 2 feet of snow on top to 85 degrees in about 2 weeks, and it can be kind of tough on a plantation. Although that actually did come out okay based on our fall survey, but this year was a little better conditions for planting. So that's all complete. As far as 2024 sales go, Boise has indicated, and that's gonna I think hold, because they would need to be started by now if they were going to get done this year, that they're going to hold that sale till next year to harvest. That's a 2-year contract, so they have until the end of 2025 to do that. But everything's in place that they were to have squared away by April 1 this year. So we'll look forward to them working on that next year. The 550 Road number 3 sale, that's a 1-year contract, and Bighorn Logging is in full swing there, hand cutting and machine cutting that sale, and doing a bunch of road maintenance and rocking, and getting the 550 and 500 roads tuned up for hauling here probably in the next few weeks. So that's good to see. They're definitely on schedule for finishing by September. And then one significant project that's come up is this Haskins culvert replacement. The road has started to fail where it crosses Haskins Creek, just below the dam and right next to the treatment plant there. So the best course of permitting the work there is through ODF, because that's considered a forest road. And so that's a real streamlined process. We met with ODF last week, and I've since put in a request. Typically, you'd have to wait till July and August and the first part of September to work in a stream like that. That's called the in-stream work period. In extreme cases like this, where, I mean, that's the main access road to the treatment plant that supplies the water to 35,000 people. We need to accelerate the repair there. So I put in, and that shouldn't be a problem, I put in a request to ODF, to Brent O'Neill, the stewardship forester for the area, to waive that requirement so we can get going on that much sooner. And so that's going to trigger a meeting with Fish and Wildlife out there. And I've done this before in an emergency case with the utility. So he didn't anticipate any trouble there, and he'll be communicating with them to explain the situation, and we'll get the ball rolling. And there's a little bit of paperwork to get together for that permit in terms of drawings, and I'll do a stream profile and gonna need to meet with the contractor and so on, but we're getting the ball rolling on that right away. So, any questions?
That related to the emergency
Yeah.
declaration. Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
No question.
No questions.
No questions.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brent.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, that takes us to our next partner report, which is Public Works Director Jeff Hunsaker from the city.
Yeah. Put it up there. Good evening, commissioners. It's Jeff Hunsaker, the relatively new Public Works Director here in McMinnville. Almost 2 months now, and joining me tonight is James Lofton, our city engineer, who's really been taking the lead on this stormwater project the last few months. And so he's here to correct me when I say something wrong. Here to support. Okay. So this is kind of the quick agenda of what we have tonight. And this presentation is actually just a bridged presentation of what we're going to be giving our council tomorrow in a work session. There's going to be more in their presentation, and really we're going to be discussing a lot of policy recommendations that are coming out of the advisory committee for the project. And there are a couple that do relate to Mac Water and Line. I was going to introduce those to you today too, but this policy discussion with the council in the work session hasn't occurred yet, so that's giving a bit of a bit of a preview. You can nap tomorrow during the session if you'd like. So really what started this process, and really it's the policy and the mission, values, and goals here of the city. And the mission of the city is we're delivering a high quality services and collaboration with our partners that for a prosperous, safe, and livable community, as it says up there. There's also in the MacTown 2032 strategic plan, there's a value of stewardship, and we're responsible caretakers of our shared public assets and resources. And then there's council goals, and with growth and development character, there's a goal for implementing an environmentally sustainable plan. So with that, we look at all of our work that we do, and one of the responsibilities we have is for stormwater infrastructure and programming, and there's some limitations we have with that. First is really there's a lack of sufficient sustainable resources. We have to rehab and replace the system that we have. We have to comply with an expanding regulatory environment, and we have to just operate the system as it is. And right now we do have some funding. We'll get into what that is in a little bit, but it's not really it's not as equitable as it could be for our stormwater system. Right now it's coming from the street fund, coming from the sewer fund, and those aren't based on the impact to the stormwater system. There's a more equitable way to determine the funding for people that use the stormwater system. So with that, we have an opportunity to consider adoption of a stormwater utility. Just to again reiterate, there is an existing stormwater system here in the city. There's about 145 miles of stormwater pipelines that are out there right now that we're responsible for taking care of. There's also open channels, ditches, things like that. There's a significant number of catch basins to collect that water as it's running off the streets. And there's some public and private detention basins here in the city. And we expect that to increase over time with some of the new regulations that are coming. And a typical stormwater program is going to have preventative maintenance as well as emergency repairs. There's going to be a series of capital projects to build new capacity in the system as well as replace failing infrastructure or infrastructure that's reached the end of its life. Then there's the regulatory compliance and then development review that we're going to have to do as development comes in. That construction is going to have to meet stormwater standards that we're going to set up. In addition to there being existing infrastructure, we have existing regulations that are pretty new here at the city. Back in 2022, there was the Mercury Total Maximum Daily Load or TMDL requirement that we got 5 years to implement. And it's got a series of regulations, including public outreach, staff training we have to do, local erosion control permitting program, and additional inspections and tracking that we have to do. So we already have regulations now that are new that we don't, it's not optional. We have to do this. But we also see some upcoming regulations, an MS4 permit or municipal separate storm sewer system permit. This is similar, it's an EPA permit, similar to the NPDES or National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. And this is a permit for municipalities that have a separate storm sewer system, one that doesn't flow to the treatment plant and get treated like they used to be back in the day. It's actually required for cities that have an urban area over 50,000. And so that's in addition to MW&L. So our urban area as defined by the census includes actually Lafayette and Dayton because they're how nearby they are. So our urban area is actually 41,000 while the city's population is 35,000. So that's the requirement at the federal level for an MS4 permit, but the permitting gets passed down to Oregon DEQ and they have discretion to add additional or to at their discretion require the permit before that point. And DEQ is probably going to do that. We've had discussions with them. They have what's called a phase 2 general permit that includes lots of cities, and they're in discussions to re-up the existing cities and then do a new permit for additional cities moving forward. And we're going to meet that threshold. We're the largest city in Oregon that does not have an MS4 permit. We're expecting that in the next 2 to 5 years, and then similar to the Mercury TMDL, we'll get about 5 years to implement that. But there's a series of products we're going to have to submit to DEQ for their review, like a stormwater management plan and things like that. The requirements are similar to the TMDL, but in addition, we have that stormwater management plan. There's a spill prevention and response program that we have to do. There'll be additional water quality monitoring, and the biggest change really is in the development standards that are required. So kind of mentioned current funding before. Right now, funding comes from the street fund, and most of that goes toward street sweeping and the LEAF program. That's about 400,000 of that $440,000 there. So the street fund is really paying the majority of what we spend on our stormwater program. And like I said, it's for the street sweeping that happens here in the city. In addition, wastewater puts money in there for emergency repairs as well. And then there's some general fund that dollars, and some of that is actually paid for by wastewater and street fund that do transfers to the general fund. But that's for our engineering support and regulatory compliance. So James's time and his staff's time. So we have about 600 or so thousand a year to spend on our stormwater program, which you all are used to what it takes to run a utility. That's really not enough for the amount of infrastructure that we have. So why are we considering a stormwater utility? And you know, it's right here, and I can kind of go through these, but it's going to provide a more equitable distribution of costs. And when I say that more equitable, I'm talking about having the rates be determined by the impact to the system. So usually what stormwater utilities do is the amount of impervious area that you have and how that impacts the stormwater system. So we'll establish that rates based on that use. It also will reduce demands on the wastewater and street funds, which also have their own funding requirements that they have to meet. Street fund, you got to maintain the streets out here. We got to do overlays, slurry seals, all that. It's going to provide a stable, sustainable funding mechanism. If we have a stormwater utility, it'll improve our community safety, reduce impacts during flooding and storm events, and importantly, also protect our waterways from pollutants and sediments. So the framework of setting up a utility, we have to do local code change. That's going to be a requirement. There'll be an ordinance that's needed. We have to do financial planning, identify our revenue requirements and the funding level needed to do that. Then we'll have to select a rate structure and calculate those rates. Then after that, it's administration, developing the support systems, billing, accounting, customer service, all that. Right now, in the funding progression, we're in interim. It's a shared maintenance and funding source, and you saw that it's about that 600,000. And again, most of it's going to the street sweeping, so not really taking care of the infrastructure that's there. We're hoping that if the council adopts utility here in June, we move into the utility startup timeline, where we start some initial planning, we do a master plan. We'd have that dedicated funding source and do some of the near-term regulation work. After the master plan is completed and we have a better understanding of our system and its needs, we'll look at the rates again, but we'll also develop secondary funding like SDCs. You need a CIP list, which is going to come out of a master plan to develop SDCs. And figure out the amount of maintenance we should be doing. I always like to use a very simplistic way of thinking about maintenance, but with the 145 miles of pipe, if you assume pipes last 100 years, which we know they don't, but if you assume they last 100 years, you should be replacing or saving up to replace 1% of your system every year. And that would mean you need to be replacing 1.4 miles of stormwater pipe every year, and we do not do that. So there's been some key steps in the rate setting methodology. The first two steps are completed. One is projecting the revenue requirements for that increasing level of service to get to that utility startup level. And then we're looking to allocate the cost to some customer classes, and there's some recommendations that are going to be presented to the council tomorrow. The next steps would be adopting that ordinance at the council level. That's their decision. And then once that's adopted, we can move into what it takes to begin billing. There has been some community engagement with this so far. A big one is the creation of the Stormwater Project Advisory Committee. It included 12 members throughout the community, some residents, some that represented commercial customers, some that represented industrial customers. And there was a series of 4 meetings that occurred. The last was in March, and at the end of that meeting, they came up with a series of policy recommendations, and those are the ones we're presenting to our council tomorrow for their discussion. There's some other outreach stuff that's happened, and we're going to be doing more if the utility is adopted. But a big one is there's going to be a community meeting on the evening of May 9th, inviting members of the community to come out, learn about the utility, and provide feedback that we will then again share back with our council. So the big policy recommendation that came out of the advisory committee was there was an overall consensus to move forward with the adoption of a stormwater utility. That utility startup has a rate recommendation of a phase in over 3 years, starting with the 950 number, then 1250 and 550, and then 1550. These are the amounts for a monthly cost for an ERU or an equivalent residential unit, which is essentially set at 3,500 square feet of impervious area. So if you own a large business with a large parking lot, you take the amount of impervious area divided by 3,500 to figure out the amount of ERUs in your monthly bill from there.
There's a little bit of confusion on this slide. The phase one, when it says 2024, that's this coming fiscal year that we're currently in. But that actually probably to give time for us to work out the billing, likely wouldn't start being billed until February or receive any funding until February 25. So that would be 950 would be billed for 5-6 months, and then we'd go into phase 2 for the next year, so on and so forth.
For the multi-unit apartment complex, would that be renter, that number would be assessed to the apartment owner, not spread out amongst them?
Yeah, it would be assessed to who's paying the monthly bill, essentially. And so we can get into that a little bit more here, but the policy recommendation is to use MAC Water and Light for the billing service. So it would be whoever's paying that monthly utility bill, and then how they spread it out if it's, I mean, it depends on what their policy is for charging for utilities, that apartment complex really.
Mhm. I'll wait till.
Okay. And just for reference, where does, this is something that everybody always wants to see when you're talking rates, sorry, Jim. Is where does that set us amongst our partners? And if you, I can actually.
Where are we?
Okay.
We're
The
the
orange one.
first
Yeah,
orange one.
ones.
Okay,
I can
all
actually
right.
use this little fancy doohickey. So the first 950 would put us about here. So, on the lower end, with equivalent to the partners. And then when it gets to that 3-year build out, it would put us more in this range, a little about in the middle of the road. But that also doesn't take into account that those other rates would likely increase over that 3-year period. So even after the 3-year implementation, we're going to be, in the middle, maybe low, maybe high in the middle in comparison to other municipalities in the area. A big thing to see from this is the amount of other municipalities that have stormwater utilities. It's a very common practice here in the state of Oregon. Most cities have moved to this model some decades ago.
It's also another thing worth noting. You see on the low end of the scale, Kaiser, Redmond, Westland. Westland has a lot of systems that discharge directly to the Willamette, so they don't have to have large piped systems. Redmond and Kaiser, they have really great infiltrating soils. So again, not a huge need for a large complex system. McMinnville has horrible soil for infiltration. So all of our stormwater needs to be piped. And so to be on the lower end or even on the low side of the halfway point, we were pretty pleased with where we ended up compared to other communities.
Great context. Thank you. So like I said, there's a series of policy recommendations. I'm not going to go over them all today, but there are some that affect water and light. The first being there's a recommendation that Mac Water and Light properties not be billed for stormwater services. This is similar to what the billing policies are currently for water and wastewater services. So like this site here would be assessed a stormwater rate on it. And then the other big one is the committee recommends the city work with Mac Water and Light to incorporate stormwater utility billing in the monthly billing statements that go out of the utility bills. One policy discussion that did not occur at the advisory committee, while it did talk about we want to move forward that using this like a utility and it operates like a utility. One thing that wasn't discussed is what happens if people aren't paying their utility bill. And since the discussion was treating this like a utility, this staff at McMinnville Public Works is recommending that the utility follow the same rules as electrical, water, and sanitary with regards to utility shutoffs. That's a policy decision, but essentially, if you don't pay your bill, and it becomes, I believe, 60 days past due, is that correct? A shutoff could occur to encourage people to pay their bill, essentially. So we're recommending at the staff level that occur as well for the stormwater. But again, that's a policy decision that the council is going to have to discuss.
And the council hasn't discussed that.
Not yet. This
We'll
is
be briefed for the first time tomorrow night.
it'll be
Yeah.
briefed for the first time tomorrow
Yeah.
about that. And so I can't really say what they're going to say about that one, but
Yeah, and ultimately, that's a decision for this body to make, whether, on what basis you turn utilities off.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, it seems like, electrical and water are, essential services that, really that people have to have. And I don't know, I don't see how those tie together, but and I think we had some of those conversations with the city services fee too. So, but I think until the council talks about it, I guess we'll find out what the council, what their conversation is.
yeah, and I just, speaking about other bodies here in the state, There are some that treat the stormwater utility the same way, and the shutoffs occur just like they would. Not everybody can turn off electrical like my water line can. So where I used to work in Beaverton, they would turn off, but we turned off water in those cases. Water, sewer, and storm were like treated that way. We didn't do electrical.
Yeah,
shutoffs.
here we turn water off or electric off. We don't turn water off typically, because electric's the much larger bill, correct?
Well, overall, the intent though is to make sure we're treating the stormwater as a utility.
Mhm.
It needs to be set up as one in order to be sustainable. It's our recommendation. And part of that is the harsh reality of sometimes, well, the utility bill needs to be paid. So
Yeah.
it'll be an interesting discussion.
It's tough with stormwater. You can't really turn it off.
Yeah.
There's
that's-
no way to turn it off. It's
doesn't feel the
it's a
same.
passive infrastructure in a lot of ways. With sewer, you can turn off water and the sewer doesn't really get used in that scenario. So stormwater is a little interesting in that way, but there are other communities that have gone with that billing practice. So it's just a discussion that the council needs to have on what they'd like to see, and then eventually if the council adopts the stormwater utility, we'll have that. There'll probably be a discussion here as well.
I think there's probably a lot of legal discussion around what we can and can't do with people's water and electricity. So if we circle back around to that, I'm sure we'll be talking about that some more.
Yeah, and there has been recent changes to regulations of when you can shut off and things like that to do with winter events and some other things like that happened through. It was at the utility commission for the state.
Yeah, but that doesn't affect us because we're not regulated by the PUC.
Oh, okay.
And for like a lot of multi-tenant complexes, apartment complexes and things, a lot of times isn't electric metered at the resident?
Yeah,
So-
so how would you turn stormwater off if somebody doesn't?
Yeah, it's
pay?
just kind of there's we went through this already once
Yep,
before,
yep.
so there's all
It's not
kinds
gonna
of
be an
little
easy
pieces,
process.
but
Yep.
We'll have
you'll
to
figure it out.
Yes.
figure it
It'll
out,
get
yeah.
figured out.
But wanted to be open and honest about it.
That's good.
That's why part of the reason why we're here tonight is to just say, there's these discussions that are gonna be happening at the city council, and
Yeah.
this is one of the recommendations. So,
Excuse me,
oh,
hi,
yes.
this is Tom. Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank you for sharing the details with us and tell you that I think our role is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the McMinnville Water and Light Commission's role is very narrow here. We're really only talking about things like billing and cutting off our customers. Is that correct? You don't really, I don't think it'd be appropriate for us to give you input on the rates, for instance. That's a council decision, I think.
Yeah, correct. We weren't here looking for feedback and all of that. We were here mostly just to inform and letting you know where we're at in the process and some of the next steps.
Thank you. And then thank you. And I know there's some information you don't have. When we agreed to bill the city service fee, there was
Did we lose it?
from there. I'm
You
sorry,
broke
can you
up.
hear me?
No.
You broke up a little bit there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so when we did the city service fee billing, there was a lot of discussion about cutoff. And I think the council probably remembers that. But if you would be sure that they understand that in the past, the commission has not agreed to do that. And we felt that it wasn't appropriate to cut off basically a life-threatening service to someone for not paying a city fee that has no relationship to it. So, I'm only one vote, but please don't leave this meeting with the impression or give the city council the impression that the commission is unanimously fine with that. Okay?
Yeah, I'm not planning on sharing what we're talking about here today for the council's discussion tomorrow. That will be, one of the many things they have to discuss.
Well,
Yeah.
if you would please, disclose to them, or I guess Adam can do that,
Yeah, Tom, I'll be running that meeting tomorrow night, that work session, because the mayor's still
Perfect.
gonna be out of
Okay,
state.
great.
And I'll definitely make sure that council's reminded and has kind of a little brief history lesson on what we went through with getting the billing on board with the city service fee and
Right.
how the mayor and I met with you and we had some staff meetings to work through that and the amount of work it took to get that online.
And
Thank you,
I
Adam.
think our only comment
I'm
would
glad,
be that we,
I'm glad you're here to hear
that we
this.
focus more on like how we operate our sanitary utility and how we operate our services fee.
So,
Again,
so there's
policy
another
discussion.
question. There's another related question I have from something earlier in the discussion. It sounds to me as if each apartment or even each house will have a number calculated for for what their fee is based on impervious area. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So have you talked to our staff about how we would bill that, or is the city prepared to give us a a list of?
Yes, we had discussions with that. We're trying not to go too far because our council obviously has not adopted a
Okay,
utility yet, but there is some work we have to do with that, and there have been discussions of what is
And-
needed, our staff to provide to Mac Water Light if that goes forward.
okay. And again, Adam recalls this probably from last time that our system can't necessarily correlate.
Yeah, you need a simplified rate structure, so
Yes.
it can work through your
Yeah,
software.
Yes, exactly. So when I looked at this and saw you had some fairly aggressive timelines, I would appreciate it if you could talk to our staff before you tell the council that's what the timeline would be,
They've been talking with us.
because we may not be able to. Okay, great. Thank you.
We've been having those conversations.
Yeah, and
Great, thank you.
yeah, and we met recently and we had a schedule that was even more aggressive. And so it's with discussions between the two staffs that we came up with this set of next steps. And, the big next one is that community meeting on the 9th, and obviously the work session tomorrow. And then with the information we glean from that, we'll move forward on developing what we need from an ordinance and whatnot, if the council wants to keep moving forward. Hopefully, hoping to have some form of adoption in June. Once that occurs, we can move forward with more of the discussions on exactly how it works with Mac Water and Light and how we will pay for the services and all that, an agreement that would be in place. And then with Mac Water and Light has discussed with the software vendor about how long it would take to implement this stuff. And that's where the implementation and the billing wouldn't begin until February of 25 at the earliest. That allows for making sure we get all the information needed to the staff here, as well as getting some test runs to make sure it would work correctly before we start billing people for it.
Great, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks for your comments, Tom.
Pardon?
And that was the end of the presentation. So if there's any other questions or comments that you all have, I'm happy to answer them. Other than that, thanks for having us tonight.
Any other questions for Jeff?
No?
All right.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
gentlemen. I'll see you tomorrow night.
All right. Time for me to go home for my son's birthday.
That's important.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have appearance requests, and do we have any of those this evening?
Rena might know, but I don't think so.
Trina, do you know of any appearance requests?
No, we have none.
Okay, thank you. Staff reports,
Stafford.
no staff reports, which brings us to new business, and up first, we have our amendment to the City of Lafayette surplus water and call on John Dietz to present.
So at the last commission meeting, we had the discussion about the Lafayette agreement. And so we've come back with the amended agreement that basically detailed those items. It was the smoothing of the agreement, the LGIP without the +2. And there was one other thing that I always forget, but I think it was tied into the smoothing of the agreement or the payment stream. Yeah. Well, Sam and I will entertain any questions.
Any questions for
I don't have any.
Sam and
questions.
John? Tom, did you have any questions?
No, thank you.
All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the amendment as presented.
And I actually don't think we're actually
So
asking.
moved.
We're actually not asking to approve tonight because we had
Oh,
not shared
okay.
this. We've not shared this with Lafayette.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, I was
Um,
gonna ask.
But if,
Okay.
I guess we're really looking to make sure we're not off track and that we're free to share with Lafayette. We'll probably see this coming back next month. or-
Yeah.
When we know we've got, we've sort of been bouncing back and forth with Lafayette, trying to make sure we're capturing the idea.
Mhm.
You're seeking for consensus to present.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
comfortable with it.
comfortable with that.
Looks good, makes sense.
Thank you.
Tom, you're good to consensus nod?
Yep, thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. That brings us to item 2, which is our raw water line construction, and we have Chad Hudson and James Burke this evening. James is taking a break.
Good evening.
Hi.
Tonight we're seeking approval of award of contract for raw water pipeline replacement of the water treatment plant. This project was identified in the 2011 Water Master Plan. The existing pipe right now is a 1976 vintage with multiple types of pipe. We have ductile iron, wrapped steel, of different sizes as well. So in 2014, we exposed the pipe and it showed that it was towards the end of its useful life. The new project would be to install a 36-inch HDPE pipe that would go from the vault near Haskins Dam to the treatment plant. Through this, we went through a formal competitive bid process. We did have a mandatory pre-bid meeting at the water treatment plant. We had 4 contractors show up to that. We had a formal bid opening in this room on April 2nd, and we had 2 bids. Emery and Sons Construction Group in Tappanee, with Emery Construction Group being the low bid. Once we got the bids, we sent them over to Jacobs, who designed this project, to review for responsibility and responsiveness. And attached to this memo is Jacobs' recommendation of award to Emery and Sons. Emery and Sons is a fairly large outfit that has good HDPE experience with some of the towns mentioned there: Hood River, Gresham, Albany, and Bend. That coupled with Jacobs' recommendation, staff is also recommending to award this contract to Emery and Sons for the raw water pipeline replacement for $1,877,175. That's the lowest responsive bid. And authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the contract pending a notice of intent to award and no protest being filed.
Anything you'd like to add, General Counsel?
Well, and what I might do is, do you have any questions for Mr. Hudson?
No, I don't.
And if you're right with it, I might just voice the motion for you. So we'd be looking for a motion to award a public improvement contract to Emery and Sons Construction Group LLC for the raw water line replacement project for a maximum price of $1,877,175 as a responsible bidder submitting the lowest responsive bid in accordance with ORS 279C.055 regarding a competitive sealed bidding process, and to authorize the mayor and clerk of the commission to sign the contract pending issuance of a notice of intent to award and no protests being filed. So
So move.
I'll second.
Oh, so moved.
All right, Tom, looks like Chair Tate beat you to that, and we have a second by Commissioner Christensen.
Well, I'm a long way away. That's the problem.
Yes.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Aye. I saw it look smooth.
did.
Motion passes 4-0. And that will bring us to determining contracting method for facilities. And again, Chad Hudson.
I'm gonna pass these out. I meant to attach that. We included this with our capital budget presentation we had. Just kind of a reminder of the phases that we're looking at. I know I get confused if I don't have it in front of me as well. So we've been having discussions internally with staff and kind of how we proceed forward with this project as it is in the next year's capital budget. And we're kind of at a standstill right now as far as proceeding. The traditional procurement process is a design bid build process, which we go out and we would contract with a engineer and architectural firm through an RFP process. They would design it, and then we would set it out on the street like we typically do with a lot of the jobs we do, just like raw water, you know, those core competency type things, substations, the water and electric type stuff, or bread and butter stuff. We're really comfortable with that. This is a little out of our wheelhouse. It's substantial. It is a substantial project for us, and we don't build facilities and buildings every day. So with that, we've been having conversations on how we can navigate through this. And so we've been discussing alternate contracting methods outside of the traditional design bid build. And so I've listed a couple here, potential options that we can look at. Kind of what we're looking at for tonight is commission kind of head nod to move forward on one of these. There'll be more steps and processes in the future. We would have to eventually have a public hearing where people can come in and they can talk, and we have to have findings to exempt it from a competitive procurement process, competitive sealed bids, which we normally do for a construction contract. So it would be exempting that, and it'd be go more for a qualifications-based selection process. And so that's what we're looking at. So I've listed a couple different potential alternative delivery methods. One of them being construction manager, general contractor, which we refer to as CMGC from here on out. We did this with the water treatment plant back in 2009. I was around 2009, but I didn't have a whole lot to do with that project. But we have done it before. This particular delivery method involves 2 contracts. Can be more, but typically it's 2. So we go out, typically like we would do for an engineering and architectural firm, we go RFP qualifications based. We'd get them on board, and then we would pretty early in that process have them help us with a selection of a contractor, CMGC, construction manager, so we can get them on board early in that design phase to get their input for constructability reviews, value engineering analysis, and stuff like that. So we build a team early with 2 different contracts. I think that's the biggest thing is we'll go design build next. There's a difference in the contracts there. And so once in that phase, once they being the CMGC got to a point where we had design close enough where they can put a guaranteed maximum price together, we would negotiate that. One negative potentially is we're not getting competitive bids. So we can't sit at the table and say, oh, here are 4 prices. Yeah, we're getting a good price. So a potential option in that is we could hire a third party for construction estimating purposes to make sure that we are getting a fair price. A lot of this too is having an open book policy with the construction manager and our contractors, that we know their prices and that we make sure that they are getting competitive bids for their subcontractors. That's how we're going to be getting a lot of, value in that. So that's kind of the CMGC. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I have no questions because that's what we're doing with the navigation center.
Okay.
So I'm managing that project, so I'm very familiar with this process.
Yeah, and the construction manager part of it is that they're going to be early in the design phase. They're going to be helping us out with all the constructability stuff.
Mhm.
Once we get the full design, it kind of flips over to the general contractor, so the CMGC type. It's the name.
So is the advantage, it's some advantage is time. Is that one component of it? And then some advantages having an actual contractor be more involved in the process of the design of it, which if you have a contractor that's familiar with the, seismic and other things, then that could be helpful depending on who the
The
design.
value engineering part of it. And I think the other piece of that is the having the contractor on board. Chad said early, so that we know, hopefully we're limiting the number of change orders, because that's another big piece of that.
Design build, the typical design bid build, I think in this scenario opens itself up to a potential lot of change orders. Especially when we're doing a seismic retrofit, when we're going to start potentially tearing some stuff out, we run into a bunch of things that we
Didn't know we had.
the walls. As opposed to potentially, not saying that it's going to eliminate them, but I think it might reduce the chances through a CMGC if we had a contractor on board to kind of help us kind of through that in the design phase. Another thing too that CMGC allows for is potential early construction amendments. If we get to a place where we're feeling comfortable, we can do an amendment. They can actually start work during the design phase instead of the traditional design bid build where here's the design, now we're going to go out to bid, and then it takes so it can shorten that time frame a little bit if the commission was comfortable in doing so at that time.
So you could take, for example, the seismic retrofit and start that earlier while you're doing the rest of this building design.
Right, which is what we were, I think there was a desire to get that addressed sooner than later, so that gives us leg up. So you said Water and Light's done this process that you're talking about now with the water treatment plant. And what kind of a process did we do, or was it not so much of a project with the fuel station?
It's perfect about that.
Yes, that's a perfect segue.
Okay.
I think Tom has a question too.
Oh, Tom, got your hand up. Thank you.
Great, no, thank you. Is there a question needs to be answered first before I ask mine?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, so Chad, I didn't quite understand if one of the problems with another method is that the contractor would get into the project, and then after some demolition or attempt to build, discover there's something else that has to be changed. How would the CMGC prevent that?
There's potential, there's not, but we could do some more exploratory work in the design phase potentially. But I'm not saying it's going to go.
Okay, so yeah, because as I remember from the last time we did it, the CMGC, the contractor comes up with a design and a method of doing things, and we pay for that, and then they bid it. And then if we don't like it, we can reject it and go with somebody else. Is that Is that correct?
Potentially you could. You could throw it out and start over, yes, but.
Well, I mean,
you know,
you wouldn't start over with the design because you were
Right.
paying for that. It was just the cost of doing the design, right?
Yes,
Yeah, I think that'd be something that we would want to build into the contract.
if we can't negotiate we get to the point where we can't negotiate the price that we think we should be getting, then we could say. We cut the. We stop
I think
right-
you have to have that of CMGC, right, Sam?
Maybe I'm not following the question, but I guess where my mind was going when I was listening to you talk about this is a lot of this and the benefits, I think, of the CMGC depend a lot on the timing of when you bring in your design professional in relation to the construction contractor. And even as, and using the design professional, hiring the design professional, even, I mean, before you even go out to solicit the contractor. And so you're getting a contractor you're getting a scope of work that is addressing maybe some of these eventualities. Like, you know, how do you deal with, you know, when you can't agree on the guaranteed maximum price, which could happen.
Right.
I don't know that I answered your question, Tom.
Well,
Oh,
sort
I
of.
hear your question is you're looking for an off ramp if you
Yes.
can't come to terms with the general contractor in the CMGC process.
Yeah.
That's,
Tom, I
it's
can
my
tell-
understanding. That's what, I just want to confirm that understanding.
Yeah, I can tell you, Tom, I looked back at the 2008, 2009 contract. And one of the things that I noticed about that was it really, I think, and you might have a better memory of it than me because I was relatively new to water and light at the time, but it seemed like that was a contract that started out as a design bid build, and it later was kind of converted into a GMCG. And there was quite a gap between when the engineer was hired, design work was done, and then it was, 7-8 months later before the commission took the step to go to the alternate method. And I think that hopefully, if you get the design professional on board early, you can mitigate some of those challenges. But that's that.
Doesn't the contractor normally handle the design as well? And then I thought that our staff had recommended that we take another step to protect ourselves by having somebody look at to tell us what the cost was. But I thought it was the contractor would choose a design engineer, or we would together with them, and then they would come up with a way to do it that was value engineered. Is that correct?
I think getting the other method confused.
Yeah, that's a little bit more of a design build type of a model that we'll discuss here shortly, if I'm following you correct, Commissioner Tankersley.
Okay, so help me then. So it's our engineer, and then the contractor we select kind of works with that engineer and then refines the design and comes up with a bid. Is that the way it works?
We had 2 contracts.
Yeah, so there'll be 2 contracts. So it'll be like the selection of the engineer and architectural firm will be very much like what we currently do. We'll send an RFP out on the street. We'll select them through qualification-based selection criteria. Once they're on board, we'll probably write into their scope that they would assist us in the selection of the construction or the CMGC. We would get them on board, and that would be also qualifications-based pricing and markups and stuff like that would be involved in it. But it would be RFP. It wouldn't be an invitation to bid, sealed bid, and that's where the exemption comes in. So we'd select a CMGC, get them on board early in the design phase so that construction manager can help basically be a part of the team at the table with McMinnville Water and Light, our engineering and architectural firm, and the general or the construction manager. As a team, we can design it together. Obviously, the A&E is gonna be driving it, but the construction manager, the CM, will be given a lot of constructability reviews and stuff like that to assist us through this process. Once we get to a place where design is pretty close to 100%, that's when the CMGC will propose a guaranteed maximum price. If we go that route, but and then that's where we negotiate the GMP.
And then that's where we would also potentially hire a third party to review their bid to make sure it's fair.
I think your architectural firm can be
Okay,
part.
right.
Yeah,
Thank you. That's much clearer. Thank you for clarifying.
And the one step that's different than what I've experienced is the value engineering piece. So they get the plan set at a certain, like 90% or
Right.
95%.
Or the low, maybe 60%.
Could be 60.
Yeah.
We didn't have ours on it at that point, but, and then you value engineer, and that's how they determine their guaranteed maximum price.
Yeah.
Because you have to mutually agree that those
Right.
things that they're taking out make sense.
I think that's where the contract comes in. If we can't agree on a guaranteed maximum price, then we have to say, okay,
Yeah, there has to be an off ramp.
that's where
I
you.
think
want the
there,
offer, yeah.
I think the contract that we had has an off ramp.
Surely does.
Okay, so that's the CMGC. We'll go to this second alternative contracting method, which is progressive design build, which we did fairly recently with the fuel station. Fairly similar. I think that one of the biggest difference between the CMGC and the progressive design build is the number of contracts that you have. So a progressive design build is kind of more quote unquote a turnkey. So we're going to be hiring probably a construction contractor with the design team together. So that's one contract versus two. So
it's some entity that has both of those components.
Or it could be one that works.
Or
Yeah, they
Yeah,
can
they're-
collaborate.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that's what Mid-Valley is doing on their new building off 99. Is we hired Andrew Scott and then they brought in their designer they collaborate with.
The drawbacks are.
the drawbacks are a little, so that to me, the negative, well, I think to staff, we've talked about it, is contractual control. The engineer will be working for the contractor.
And
The
not-
contractor will be working for the engineer, so we can be lost in that a lot of times, as opposed to a CMGC, we're gonna have two separate contracts, and both firms are working for McMinnville Water. And I think in a project like this, I think we want to have that
seat at the table.
seat at the table more. I think we lose a little bit of control when we go to the design build model.
I also think when it's a setup like that you're the client and you have two contracts that you're holding, you also have to have the push-pull between the contractor and the A&E, because there's going to be points that each one wants, and so if they're under the same house, you don't get that, which has been a really positive experience in the project that I'm working on.
And
And
you-
push-pull, particularly in the construction phase.
Right, because you get the contractor who's driving everything and telling the architect no.
That could be.
Yeah.
But when you have when the A&E's coming through and doing the site walks during the construction phase, that's been helpful to be the client,
Yes.
right? To be the client.
Yeah, it's good. And we didn't have, I would say honestly, the greatest experience.
Yeah, the one we had with the progressive design build that we recently did, yeah. Some engineering, we had some troubles with one of the engineers, and it came through, but it was challenging. So I'm going through a contractor to get to the engineer.
Because you didn't have a seat at the table.
Yeah, not as much as opposed to if in that scenario, I mean, it lends itself to other issues potentially too, because now you're managing two contracts, but at least you can go directly to the source instead of kind of
Yeah.
the other way.
Yeah.
Um,
So are you Are you making a recommendation or?
So we're making a recommendation tonight to proceed forward with the CMGC alternative contracting method. And if the commission was comfortable with that, we're gonna come back to the commission at a later date, set a public hearing. And during that, have findings, so the commission can make findings to exempt it from the traditional competitive
Right,
bidding process.
we would need to come to the commission, ask the commission to set a public hearing, then return for a public hearing.
Right.
So and you could, if you want, depends on how, I mean, we could just get consensus tonight to go with one method or the other. Or you could seek a direction from the council or from the commission for the authority to actually schedule a public hearing without coming back. I'll leave that up to you.
What's your guys' timeline on this? Are you under timeline crunch or?
Need to get done before the earthquake.
Yeah.
Oh,
And you guys meet once a month?
That's good.
What do you think, Tom? I don't. What are you comfortable with?
Yeah, I feel okay with that. Us coming back with us asking us to set a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it sounds like the
If that-
consensus,
This was,
oh,
You're breaking up,
we're not
Tom.
hearing you.
so yeah, you're still, maybe you're still, yeah, but.
I'm sorry, I'm not muted. Does this work?
Can hear
Does
you
this
now.
work? I'm not
Yes.
muted.
Yeah.
You might
Okay.
turn your video
So
off.
I'm comfortable. Video off, okay.
Yeah, it might help
Just a sec.
audio if you turn the video off.
Okay, if I do that, do I have to stay here? Okay, video's off. So yes, I'm comfortable with the idea of staff putting something together, coming back and asking us to set a public hearing.
Sounds good.
Yep.
That sounds good.
Need anything else, Sam?
No.
Thank you.
He's
Thank
still
you.
here. He's
Thank you for that,
coming.
Chad.
Oh,
Next up, we have purchase of cabin chassis, and Chad will focus on that again.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, today we're looking for permission approval to purchase one new model year international cabin chassis. And next year's capital budget, we have a line item in there for a remount of a digger derrick. So we have a 2013 international digger derrick with an Alltech digger derrick right now that is in need of replacement. As we've talked about several times, lead times right now for a new one are 4 to 5 years out. And the truck that we have right now, we've experienced a lot of problems with. It's been in the shop a lot this year. In fact, we spent over $30,000 just in maintenance costs this year on this truck alone.
And that was the engine, not the boom and.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah. And so we are looking, we've been exploring different avenues to try to get trucks here earlier. And so one of the things we've looked at is remounting the service body and the boom from the existing truck and putting it on a new chassis. And so that's what we're looking to do. We actually did that with a one-person bucket truck that we have right now, and it turned out really good. And so we are looking to get commission approval to purchase one cabin chassis through the state of Oregon, our Oregon Cooperative Purchasing Program. There's a price agreement through Peterson Trucks, and so we're looking for approval on that. And then we're also looking for a declaration of surplus on the cabin chassis, the existing one, once we get the truck in operation. So we're looking for approval of purchase of $132,663.90. For this year, we're hoping to get a 2024 year model. There's 2 slots left, and we're hoping that we can get one of those slots.
And so then will you be coming back to get the approval for the attachment, or is that part of this? cross,
No, this is just for the,
just get the vehicle.
Just get
and
the
then come
vehicle,
Back and
yeah.
get
Well-
the attachment.
We'll be including the next piece in next year's budget. Well, both pieces
Oh,
probably because
Okay.
the truck won't be here till next year anyway.
Well, it's, it's half the cost of a new one, so I think we're getting a bargain.
yeah, they're telling us right now to budget 500,000 to 600,000.
Wow. Wow.
And wait 4 years.
And wait 4 years. Yeah, we're estimating that Spring Mountain will probably cost us 250, somewhere in that range.
Is it two motions or one?
I think we'll do two.
All right, any other questions for Chad before I call on general counsel to brief us on a motion? Anything from you, Tom? Questions?
No question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first motion, I'll voice this motion, a motion approved to purchase one new model year International HV 607 cab and chassis from Peterson Trucks Incorporated for a contract price of $132,663.90 via the State of Oregon Price Agreement number 1641, available to the Oregon Cooperative Purchase Program members. That's motion number one.
All right,
So moved.
Second?
we have a first by Chair Tate and a second by Chair Christensen. All those in favor of motion number one, say aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye. Motion number one passes unanimously 4-0, and now general counsel for motion number two.
Number two is a motion to declare the motion for declaration of surplus of fleet asset number 626 cabin chassis only, a 2013 International 7,400 series, and authorize the general manager to liquidate the asset in accordance with the Water and Light public contracting policy.
I'll move.
All right, and the second,
second.
Is that one that Jody needs? Does Jody need that truck?
We still,
No,
we still have to get a picture.
I know. I'm good. I'm good.
all right, so we have a.
Okay, just wanted to be sure.
We have motion moved by Commissioner Christensen and a second by Chair Tate. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right.
And motion two passes unanimously 4-0. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
You're out of the hot seat.
James is in.
All right, so next up we have our emergency Haskins Creek culvert repair, and we have James Burke to brief us on that. Thank you, James.
Good evening. So Brent Keller and Forrester talked about this a little bit earlier. I'll kind of do a short recap, but on March 14th, it was reported by our staff, water treatment plant staff, that we had a culvert that was potentially failing. Had Stantec Engineering go up there and do an investigation on it, and determined that it was had reached its life expectancy and was failing. So based on their recommendation and us having a contractor, Emery and Sons, came up and looked at it as well. There's issues in regards to chemical deliveries, emergency response to the treatment plant, link dam and reservoir in the watershed. It's also a concern in regards to wildfires up in the watershed. So with those concerns, in the location of this culvert, which is it's under Haskins Creek Road, which enters the treatment plant and the dam and watershed, we are looking at requesting commission to declare it an emergency to repair it.
Any questions for James?
No. No.
All right, I'll call on general counsel. To... Oh, go ahead, Don.
Did you say no?
You may not have.
Oh, okay. No questions, Tom?
No, I'm sorry, no questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll read the resolution by title only. The resolution number 2024-5, a resolution by the City of McMinnville Municipal Corporation of the State of Oregon, acting by and through its Water and Light Commission, declaring an emergency and awarding a contract for emergency work.
All right. And
I'll move.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion by Chair Tate for resolution 2024-5 and a second by Commissioner Christensen.
As well, Ms. McManus, poll the commission.
Yes, Council President Garvin,
Aye.
Commissioner Tate,
Aye.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen.
Aye.
Resolution passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
General manager comments,
No comments this evening.
commissioner comments,
No comments.
any comments, Tom?
No comments. No, thank you.
And that brings us to financial information. Any questions around those?
No, no.
All right, that will conclude our regular meeting, and I'll have general counsel read us into executive session.
So we're going to enter executive session this evening pursuant to ORS 192-660 sub 2 sub F to consider information and records are exempt from public disclosure under ORS 192-345 sub 23 relating to information revealing security measures to protect information processing in ORS 192-660 sub 2 sub P to consider matters relating to cybersecurity infrastructure and responses to cyber security threats. I don't think we have any media with us tonight, but we did. We've been instructed not to share any information out of this executive session. We will not be returning to an open session because there will be no further action taken by the commission. So we'll be leaving the open session, not to return.
Are we
Thank
good to
you.
go?